Hey, I actually created my own.
Yeah. That's where I figured we'll have some time. Yeah, there's somewhere I'm just.
No, man, I just looked at the video, and I'm telling you, I looked at it. Oh, man, I can't. I've literally probably had like a week. No, he selected out of January yesterday.
Yeah. You want to hang out? No, we can't. No. Maybe later. Yeah, you're gonna take advantage of my. Yeah, no, yeah. Actually.
No, you could have said today.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. So today we are going to be looking at some new concepts. We'll be going to look at what API means, what is JSON, and then AJAX. All are JavaScript concepts, but we are going to take a look at it from the JavaScript perspective and also jQuery. Okay. Now, before we begin, we'll start with a quick warm-up exercise. This is based on JavaScript objects. Okay, so this is number 1, and we'll do it together as a class. It's kind of similar that we did in previous weeks. Let me see. Okay, so in this exercise, we have our HTML and it has embedded JavaScript. Okay, there is one object called customer. Okay, customer object. Why? Because it has curly braces, so I can look at it and say, okay, customer is an object. And then customer has properties. Let's see how many properties. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties. Okay, first name, last name, age, address, phone number, and that's it. So if I shrink them, these are the properties. Okay, looks like first name is a string, last name is a string, age is a number, address looks like an object because I see curly braces, which is possible, right? An object can have another object within it, and then phone number looks like an array. Okay, if we open up address object, looks like the address object has 4 more properties, and all of them look to be string. Street address, city, state, postal code, all of these are string. Okay, let's take a look at phone number. Phone number again is a array. All right, and what is it an array of? Objects. It's an array of objects. And why? Because I see these curly braces, so I know this is an object. So this is an array of objects. Okay. Now, if it is an object, each element within the array as an object has two more properties, type and number, and both look to be string. Okay. So an array of objects, address is just an object, and then two string properties and one number property. That's our customer object. Okay. All right. So the purpose or the goal of this exercise is that we are going to parse and try to find values related to some of the properties. Okay. So the first one is step one. Log the first name using console log. Okay. So the first goal is that I need to output John. Right. The first name is John. How do I get that value? Okay. So let's do this together. Let's see. Kill, do you want to take the first one, please? So again, it's so we want to log the first name. If you look at the customer object, and you can just speak out and I'm going to type exactly what you say. Okay, so I want to console log the first name. Okay, so how do I start? Parentheses. Console log parentheses. Okay. Customer. Okay. And yeah. Oh well, let's take a look. Customer dot first name. No, you're right. I'm just making sure that this is what you're trying to. Why is it dot this? Because it's just trying to find the top level property, right? This one, and that's you're right. It says customer name dot first name. Oops. Okay, and this will give you the correct first name. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Does everybody see? Right. All right. Any questions on the first one? Good. All right. So do one thing, Kill. Pick somebody for me. Who's not a TA or myself is not also on your table. Let me try somebody whose name you don't know. Nicole. Oh, Brooke.
Oh, Brooke.
Brooke. All right.
Sure. I'll wait for you.
All right. So Brooke, we need to log the last name.
So the console log parentheses customer dot last name.
Customer dot last name. Right. Excellent. Straightforward. Same thing as we did with the first name. We do for the last name. Okay. All right, Brooke. Same rules. Pick somebody else for me, please. Oh.
Could you?
All right. We have a question. Hold on. Yes.
Could you do customer parentheses 1 for the first name instead of typing out first name or no?
Let me type this out and see what you're saying. So customer
Yeah.
parentheses.
Yeah, and then
Parentheses is this
yeah, and then
one.
1. So wouldn't that be 1? Right? Be 0 1. This is the last breath.
So for last name you're going to say so. Parentheses are for functions.
Oh.
If you do this, if you look at it, it's basically saying call a function named customer and pass in an argument of 1. That's what it actually means. So you cannot access an object like this. Okay. If you use square brackets, this means as an array. If you do right, that's an array. So for objects, we need to use either the dot notation or the square notation, and we won't go into it, but you can access it using the dot notation. Okay. All right. Yes, Brooke, did you choose somebody? Michael. Log the state of the address below using console log. State of the address. Let me expand this.
Alright, so
console log customer parentheses.
No, parentheses after the console log.
Okay, yeah, okay,
Dot.
okay.
Address.
Address. So first tell me, what are we trying to log? Like, what's the value that you're trying to find?
I'm trying to find the state.
The what?
Right? The log the state.
State. So which line number are you trying to log?
19.
19. Okay, does everybody see it? We're trying to find the state of the address. Okay, so keep going.
Yeah, so.
So you have customer.address.
Yeah, and then dot state.
Dot state. Okay, excellent. Yeah, that's the correct answer. So state is kind of embedded into another object. So we start with the first one, customer. We find the address, and then we find the state. And how do you do it? Customer dot address dot state. Why? Because this is another object. Okay. Any questions on this? Understood? Okay. Michael, please pick somebody for me for the last one. Oh, second last. That's right.
Here. The man who just walked in.
Oh.
You don't know what's going on?
So Miru, we have this object, okay, and we are trying to console log some of the values of this object. Okay, so your question is log the home phone number. So we are trying to log the home phone number. Oh, this is a little bit tricky though. All right, let me walk you through quickly. So we have main customer object, which has two string properties, first name, last name, age as a number. Then we have address, which is an object, and phone number, which is an array. Okay, so the address object has 4 more properties, all are string, and phone number is an array of objects. Okay, so we have 2 elements within this array. The first one is this object, and the second one is this object. Okay, now we are trying to find home phone number. That's what the statement says. Log the home phone number.
Customer.phone number.
Okay, so which value are you trying to find? Line number?
So we're looking at 25.
25. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so we are trying to log 25. Okay, so let's start with console log. Okay, you said customer dot and then
Phone number.
dot phone number. Okay,
So then would it be
what is the type of phone number? Like, what's the data type?
it's an array.
It's an array. So how do we access the array?
So it'd be like 0. So in brackets 0.
Okay, in square brackets. Excellent. 0. Why 0?
Because it's the first array.
Okay, so this is the first element that we are trying to find. Okay, excellent. So this gives me access to this object. Okay,
So we say dot number.
and dot number. Excellent. Dot number. Okay, this is a little bit tricky one. Any questions on this? So phone number is an array, right? And we are trying to find line number 25, the value in line number 25, this number, not the fax number, the home phone number. That's what the line was, okay? So how do you start? We start from customer, then phone number. Now phone number is an array, so I need to use the square brackets to access any property, any element, okay? Now which element am I trying to access? The first one. So the index of the first element is 0, okay? So when I say 0, this gives me access to the object at the first location, which is this thing, the whole thing, okay? But within this object, I'm only interested in the number. So that's why Miru said it's going to be dot and then the property, which is number. Okay? Any questions on this? Understood? Okay. Miru, please pick somebody for the last one.
Yeah, you shouldn't have linked that. I picked.
Shauna? Alright, Shauna, you can do it. Let's do it. Alright, so Shauna, we are now trying to, we log the home phone number, right? Now we are trying to console log the fax number.
Okay, so console log.
So first tell me which line are you going to get the value?
The value comes from 26.
20, do I have a different line number?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
'cause you spaced out.
Oh, it's 20, fax number,
Fax number is 28.
28, okay, and this number, this property, okay, so line number 29. All right, let's start. So we do console log parentheses, okay, customer dot phone number, okay, dot square bracket and 1. Well, let's hold up. You see this red thing, so it's telling me there's an error. So I did phone number dot and then
So no dot.
no dot, right? Why? Because this is an array, so this is how you access it. Excellent. And then dot number. Excellent. Oops, is it outside? Yeah. Let me fix this. Dot number. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. So why 1? The only difference is why, because this time I'm trying to find the second element from the same array, and the second element index number is going to be 1, right? Because arrays start with 0, so this is 0 index and this is 1. Okay, if I was trying to find the type, I would, instead of number, I would say dot type. Okay, but if I was trying to find if the number is a fax or a home phone number, so I would use the type. Okay. All right, any questions on this? Is everybody good? All right, so this is how we parse an object. We did this. You will see that from now on, you will be getting some data from somewhere else, and you will be using something similar. You will be using this kind of parsing. This is how you would get a lot of data in your website, in your web page, and your goal would be to find out what is relevant. Okay, and that's what we'll be doing today. All right. So let's do the next thing. The next thing I want you guys to do is take 5-10 minutes and find out what a API is. Okay, just these 3 letters. API. You can search for API in programming or computer science, something like that. So the goal is we're going to discuss API. What is an API? All right. So what does API stand for? Application programming okay. So API stands for application programming interface. Now, what is an API? What do you guys research? What did you find? Okay, Sarah, go ahead.
So basically, it's an interface that allows different applications to communicate and with each other. Like
Yep.
a CRM, you wanted your email to tie into your CRM. You have to have an open API.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good definition. So what Sarah is saying that API is a means to communicate with different applications. Okay, all right. Somebody else also was saying something. Who else? Any other definition? Anybody else found something about API? Nope. Any examples that you found? I mean, I can see sometimes the definition is kind of a little bit difficult to explain, and we'll go through it. Any example of an API? Yes, Josh.
When like a website asks for your location, you're allowing it to document it. It goes into an API for like Wi-Fi networks and other things that find your location.
Okay. Yeah. And could be Google Maps API or something. That's kind of finding your location. Okay, that's a really good one. Yeah, Google. Yes, Chris.
I read in it says an API is not the database or even the server, it's the code that governs the access point to the server.
Okay. Okay. So what Chris is saying is what he read was API is um, like the people standing or the gateway to a database. Like behind the APIs, there's a database, and they are kind of like the guarding that database. We'll go through that. That's another really good definition. Okay. So API in its core form, what Sarah was saying, and Josh also mentioned, it's basically a way of communication with something underlying. Okay, if you are talking to an API, right? API is actually talking to something over here. Okay, so what happens is the box that you see is behind the API on the right side. Usually this is the real thing. Okay, the thing is that we or computers or somebody who wants to access that block, right? They don't know how to talk to that application. This is usually some application. Okay, and then what API helps is how do you API defines how do you talk to that application. Okay, it makes the communication easier. That's what an API as a concept is. Okay, so anything that is communicating with an app and you are talking to this thing, whatever the layer is, that layer is called API. Okay, it could be a library, a JavaScript library such as jQuery. Could jQuery be considered an API? So what is jQuery doing? Let's suppose jQuery is an API. It's talking to JavaScript, right? It's creating a layer. It's kind of creating a library on top of JavaScript. So jQuery is also an API. Why? Because jQuery is allowing us to talk to some of the JavaScript functions, kind of making our life easier. They're saying, oh, use us and we will take care of, we'll talk to JavaScript. You don't have to worry about it. But these are the things, this is how you talk to me, and I'll make sure that you get what you're looking for from JavaScript. Okay? So jQuery is also an API. Okay? What else? Any other library that you use in JavaScript or any other programming language? Those are all APIs. Why? Again, those are interfaces. Those are like the layer on top of something. Okay, and it is making sure it allows you to talk to the underlying application. Okay. For example, when you are working on your terminal, right? A command prompt or terminal on Mac, that is also an API. Why? Because that terminal is letting you talk to the underlying operating system. Okay, I don't know how to actually do if I want to change directories, right? I use the cd command on my terminal, and that takes care of it, right? But there is a programming behind it. There's a lot of stuff that is going behind it, right? Your terminal recognizes this command, and then it goes back and talks to the underlying operating system and does something, and basically comes back and says, "Oh, this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to go to a different directory." Okay, so terminal is also kind of API. Okay, but when we talk about APIs, we are always talking about code. Okay, usually these APIs are giving us some code. For example, jQuery, right? jQuery, you have to write some code, right? That's why it's called an API. That's why we have this programming word in this. Okay. What else? Bootstrap. What do you think? Bootstrap is an API, right? Yeah, that's an API. It's code, right? It is creating a layer, or it has an interface. What is it the interface for? CSS, right? It makes it easier. It's saying, hey, if you want to do something in CSS, you can use Bootstrap. Behind the scenes, Bootstrap goes and talks to CSS. So Bootstrap is also an API. Okay? All right. Any questions on the concept for API? Basically, everything is an API. If you create a library, let's suppose, and you put it out there and you say, hey, you can use this library to do these functions. Basically, you created an API, right? Your functions in your homework, you are creating functions, right? And then what do those functions do? When the TAs are looking at your code, let's say you have a function called start game, right? And you call this function, and then somewhere you have start game definition here. Okay, so what happens this? Start game is also an API. Why? Because you are writing some code behind your start game function, which is somewhere else. Okay, but if I look at this line, I know that there's code behind and it starts the game, so I don't have to worry about it. If I'm reusing that method, I would just call that method, right? So basically, you also did an API. You created an interface. The interface is code, and this is your interface now. So basically, you're saying, hey, if you call this function, I have some code behind the scenes that will start the game. Okay, so you are constantly writing APIs too. Okay. Any other questions? Does everybody understand API? Okay, so that's the definition of an API. What we are going to be looking in this course is web APIs. Okay, and we'll be using these. Now, what are web APIs? It's kind of like a loose term. There's not like a fixed something called web APIs, but it kind of isolates to some of the concept that we are going to look into, right? API is a broad term. You guys now understand that anything basically it can be considered as an API. Now we are narrowing down to what are web APIs, okay, specifically. Okay, so now web APIs, what are web APIs? From the name, it tells me that web APIs exist on the web, which is internet or www, right? You will hear this basically just means www, which is internet. So these are the APIs that exist on the internet. Okay. Now, what are the properties of this APIs? Same concept, web API. Okay. And then you are talking to these web APIs. Okay. Let's call this a client. Okay. Basically, this is you. You are talking to those web APIs. Now, those web APIs are kind of talking to you back. Okay. This is how the communication is. Okay. Now, what are those web APIs? Those web APIs behind these web APIs is a data source or a database. I'm going to call it data source. This is a more generic term. It just means that there is a server, a box, a physical device. It doesn't matter to us, but there's something that has stored a lot of data, right? Now, data is a broad term. We can narrow it down. It could be any kind of data, right? Depends on what the web API is for. But for our purposes, there's a lot of data that is stored somewhere. Okay. Now, how do I access that data? Web APIs are that interface. Web APIs are the ones that let you access this data. They are the guardians of this data. They are secured web APIs. All that stuff is going on. But to us, these are the guardians. If you want some data, okay, you have to go through this layer. And this is what web API do. Okay? Any web API that you use is actually behind, there's a data source that has all the data. And this web API knows how to go and talk to that data, how to get the data. They know all that stuff. Okay? The only thing is they are the interface that we need to talk to. We need to understand this part of it. Okay, we don't have to worry about what this is doing right now. Okay, in our first phase, we are going to be using web APIs. In the next phase, we will actually create those web APIs. Okay, but that's after project 2. Right now, we just need to understand some of the existing web APIs and how to use them. Okay, that's the goal for until project 1. Okay, and why do we need to understand how to use them? Because this is the communication way, right? They have their own kind of like a language. So we need to learn how to talk to them, how to talk to those web APIs. Every web API is different. Okay, there's documentation related to those APIs. We need to go through the documentation and understand and learn how to speak to those web APIs. Okay. Again, the only difference between this and regular APIs is these exist on the internet. When I talk about internet, www, it means that there's actually a URL that you go to, okay, and then you can see those web APIs. That's all it means. Okay, there's a www.something/API something, and we'll take a look at it, and then you can access those web APIs. Okay, but the concept is behind those web APIs, there's a data source, there's a data bank, there's a database that has all the data that I'm interested in, but I cannot access them directly. It's hidden to me. I don't know where it is. I have no idea. And it's in a secure location. I cannot access it. Okay. The only way to do that is through a web API. Okay. Now the other thing is there should exist, of course, a web API. Otherwise, I cannot access this data. Okay. If there's no web API related to that data, there's no way I can access it unless you go ahead and hack it. But otherwise, there's no legal way you can access those data. Okay. So anything that you are trying to access, you are interested in some data, we need to research, we need to find out if there exists any web API. If it doesn't, you cannot access it. Okay? All right, let's take a break. I want to see questions. Is the concept good? What are your questions? Yes, Goose.
So like embedded content, like a YouTube video, is that like an API?
Yes. Yeah, that's an API. You'll be glad to know that YouTube also has an API. They have web APIs that they have exposed, and you can use those to get videos and whatever you want. So YouTube has a API. Google is big on this. Google has a lot of APIs. They have Google Maps API, location API. What else? What is it? Google Places. That's what the main API is called. So they give you a lot of location related data. Facebook also. Let's forget about Facebook for now. Spotify. Spotify has an API. It's extremely used, and they will give you music information. Spotify. So they have web APIs, and they are kind of exposing whatever data, user data, music data, whatever they have. You can access that information as well. What is it? They PayPal. We can look at it. I'm not sure if PayPal has an API. Does anybody know? They have. Okay. So do you know what the API does? Everything. So you can use the API to make a credit card payment or something. All the user data. That does sound like an API to me. Okay. 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 So looks like PayPal has an API. I'm sure what Arena is that they are exposing some data, but of course it's not like if I go and I can find out all your credit card information or something. Of course it's secured and they are giving and there's a reason that when you sign up for PayPal or people who are paying you or something, they are probably giving you that information that oh this person is paying you money, so this is the first name, last name, or whatever you need. So I'm not surprised. I mean, people should have. Usually, all these big companies have APIs that you can use to get some information. I haven't looked at PayPal, so I'll take a look at it and see what all they're exposing. But PayPal is one. Spotify. What else? OMDB. That's what we will take a look at it today. It's kind of like a IMDb, the movies database. They have an API that I think they go and talk to IMDb. The O stands for open source, so open source movie database. They have an API.
What is the difference between that and just accessing a database?
Right, you cannot access that database. That's the difference. There's no way you can access Google's database unless you hack into their system.
The main database.
Yes. So the only way to access any information legally is you go through their APIs that they have exposed. They are giving you permission. Hey, these are our APIs. Go ahead and use them, and then we will give you the data.
They're basically just accessible ways to
Yes.
to get to a server.
Mm-hmm. Accessible ways to get the data.
The data.
You're not even trying to access server. I don't even know where the server is. And I don't really care also.
Right.
What I care is in information and data. How can I get some data that I'm looking for? Okay. Let's suppose, for example, let's take Airbnb. Okay. Airbnb actually uses Google API. Okay, they use Google's location API. It's not, they didn't create anything from scratch. They actually contracted or they talked to Google and they're actually using Google's API for the map and location and everything. Okay, so Airbnb actually uses Google Places, Google Location, Google Maps API to get all the information. Same with Uber. I think Uber does the same. Okay, they actually pay for those web APIs and get all the information. Spotify, PayPal, Irina was saying, let's see, there are a lot, there's like, I would say like thousands of APIs. And I'll show you the a page which kind of hosts all, which kind of has APIs information. But there is, usually if it's a big company, you will see they have APIs. Basically what they're doing is they are kind of giving you access to some of the information. Okay, any other questions? Question? No? USPS, okay. So I'm pretty sure you can create something, put in the tracking number and they give you information, so they have APIs for that. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay, so that's that I get what, but when I'm talking about web APIs, I'm saying, are they actually exposing that API to you? Can I go and write some code and do the same thing using USPS? Okay, so then they're not actually exposing any web APIs. Their website is an API, right? That they are using to access information, but they don't have any public web API that anybody can go and use it. These are all public APIs. You can actually write code and do the same thing. That's what I was saying. Airbnb wrote code and they talk to Google APIs and get all the information. You can do the same thing. You can use the same thing over here. you can use the same thing with Spotify. You can actually write code. They have a really good documentation, and over the course of few days, we'll take a look at them. You can write code and actually get all this information from these APIs.
We didn't get all the information, like how.
Could be music related information for a user. Could be whatever channels or radio channels they have. Different kind of information. Again, whatever is publicly available and whatever they are giving it to you. Of course, they are not going to give you everything, but something that they have found which is okay to share. Okay? We'll take a look. We'll start with some easier ones like OMDB, and you will see how we can get all that information. But Spotify is a really good one, and a lot of people use them. I mean, I think there's a homework, but we don't go officially with the Spotify. I want you guys to take a look at it. A lot of people use that in their project also, depending on what the project is. But I've seen a lot of people using Spotify. It's just a little bit tricky, but if you understand the documentation, you should be able to use it. But we'll get there. We'll start with something easy for now. Okay, any questions on the concept? Does everybody understand what Web API is doing? Okay, now, how do I talk to Web API? Like, what is this communication looks like? Okay, so there's a format that this communications comes back. So what I'm saying is that let's suppose I created a website. I'm using let's say Google's API. What is that data coming to me? Okay, how does that data look like that comes back to me? This data is in a format called JSON. Okay, so the pronunciation for this, and I have done research, everything, it's called JSON, right? But you will see here people calling it JSON. I don't know, but the right pronunciation from my research is JSON. Okay, so the format that comes back, the exchange, the talking to these web APIs is JSON format. What JSON means is JavaScript object notation. Basically, this is a JavaScript object. That's all it means. Okay, so remember we did the first exercise. The data that you're going to get will be an object, a JavaScript object. That's how you get that data. Okay, so you're going to get a lot of data, and everything is going to be in an object. Now you're going to use a similar strategy. You're going to parse it and only take the properties that you're interested in, and then kind of ignore everything else. But the main communication between these web APIs is using JSON. Okay. Now, in few years back, this is not the only format. The other format is XML. Okay. So you will find web APIs. You will see some options when you are trying to use that API. They will ask you. They'll say, "Hey, do you want the data back in JSON format or XML format?" XML is a little bit older format. Any API that you will see will always have support for JSON, right? That's the format, and everybody is using JSON format. Highly unlikely that you will ever run into something that says, "Oh, I'm not going to give you JSON," instead you have to use that XML. So you don't have to worry about it. But over here, you need to understand that there are two formats that the data can be sent, XML and JSON. But we'll be looking at JSON. You'll be working on JSON. The APIs that we create will all be in JSON format. Okay? Okay? All right. Any questions on this? And JSON format is just the JavaScript object that we looked at. That's how the data is going to come to you. You're going to get the data and then parse it and get the properties out that you're interested in. Okay? Questions? Everybody good? So how do you talk to these web APIs? You talk using this thing. So you send a request and you get the data back, and the data is in JSON format. Okay? All right, the last thing is AJAX. This communication, all this stuff is called it's a more technical term. It's called AJAX, right? This communication, talking over the internet, anything that you are talking to an API over the internet, that kind of comes under a concept called AJAX. Okay, it's just a fancy term, but basically this is the communication that I just outlined. That's what it is. Okay, now AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Okay, so just by the name you can see it's a little bit older name because it has XML in the name, and we are using JSON format. So this name was coined maybe like, I don't know, 20 years ago or something, right? So the name is still around. What it just means is, how do you, from your JavaScript code, how do you talk to these web APIs and then get the data back? This concept is called AJAX. Okay, so when I talk about AJAX in JavaScript, when I write the code, basically what I'm trying to do is I am trying to make a communication from my JavaScript code to a web API and then getting this data. Like this cycle kind of comes under something called AJAX. Okay, AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Okay. Questions? Everybody good? Okay. Before we we'll take a look at some APIs. So what I want you guys to do is, let me slag this out. This is a custom made website. Let's see. It's called Mongo Scraper. Okay, so take a look at it. See what is going on, how the website is working. So it says New York Times edition. So behind the scenes, it is actually getting all this news. This is not news that somebody is making. This is actually going out to New York Times API. You can Google that. Okay, I did slag it out earlier. I hope people signed up for that. So New York Times exposes an API. Okay, and what does that API do? It sends news articles back to you. Okay, and this website, if you can see the URL, it's like a custom made website by somebody. What they are doing is they are getting all this information from New York Times API and just building a new fancy UI around it. Okay, New York Times itself has their own website. They are using the same APIs, but they are also giving access to us that we can use their APIs to get the same information. Okay, now let's see. So could find Chrome JSON formatter. Let's see, is this one? Yeah. Okay. Go to Chrome Web Store or just Google Chrome JSON formatter. You will come across this extension. Add it to your Chrome. This will help us actually visualize the JSON object clearly. All right. If you don't use this, I'll show you. It comes in like one line, and you won't be able to understand what's going on. But this JSON formatter, it goes ahead and formats our object kind of nicely, and this is how it's going to look like. Okay. Once you have that, let me go ahead and send you the next link. So, is it coming back? So, now look at the URL. This is actually an API. You see the API in the URL? What this means is, this is the data that you get when you call a web API. Remember I said that when you're talking to an API, you get JSON data back, and this is what you're getting back. So if you go to this API, look at the URL, okay? Um, if you did not install JSON formatter, this is how it's going to look like, okay? If you installed it and you say parse, it kind of looks nicer. But again, the main points that I want you guys to see is this is an, eventually this is still JSON, it's an object, but what is it? It's an array. It's returning you an array, okay? If you open this array, this is an array of objects, okay? When you go to this URL, you are talking to a web API. Which API? It's a New York Times API, okay? What this does is it gives you an array of objects. Remember we did a similar parsing. This is giving you 8 objects apparently, okay? And now if you open it up, it has some properties, headline, summary, URL, right? So in your code, you can pick these properties out and then use jQuery and JavaScript and HTML to kind of show this, something like this. So these are basically bootstrap cards, and you are taking those headlines, okay? These headlines and summary and kind of showing it in your own card format. That's all you're doing, okay? So you are basically making use an API that is exposed like New York Times. Okay, you talk to them and they give you JSON data, right? How does your data look like? This is what you get. Okay, you're going to get something like this. Now, in my code, in my HTML, JavaScript, and jQuery code, they have created basically looks like a card, okay? And card heading, they are putting this information, headline, and in the card body, they are putting this summary. That's all they're doing, okay? But if you have another idea for a different UI or a different website, and this is what you'll be doing in your project also. You're going to find APIs that are exposing information that give you something bad that you're interested in, and then you're going to take this information and build your own UI on your own web page and kind of show that information over here. Okay, but this is how the APIs work. So this is my front end, this is my Bootstrap, JavaScript, jQuery code, or whatever, right? This is my website. But behind the scenes, when I'm calling an API, when I'm talking to a web API, this is how I'm getting the information back. How did I do? Oh, this is the next URL that I sent on Slack. Yeah. It's not showing up. It might be that it went down or something. Maybe. Yeah, I just refresh it. It might be like a lot more people are hitting on it, so that's why it's kind of going down. But eventually, it will show up as a JSON file. We'll take a look at some other APIs that are actually up 24/7. This is a custom-made one. I think it's by somebody from the Bootstrap. If you see the app, somebody deployed it in Heroku, which you guys will be doing eventually also. So that's why it might be like going up and down. Let's see. Let's take a. Let's take a look at this one. So I'm going to Slack out this link, rapidapi.com. Okay. So this is a good website that hosts a lot of APIs. If you go to Rapid API, take a look at it, play around and see what APIs that are available and see if you can run them. They actually have options to run those APIs also. So let's see. So you see in your Rapid API, they have APIs for data, sports, finance, travel. So sports. Okay, so there are a lot of APIs related to that. Take a look at them and see what data are you getting back. Now, not all APIs are free. I hope you guys appreciate the fact, right? Because there are a lot of people who are exposing the data that they have collected, right? Why are they exposing? Because they want to make money off it, right? So a lot of APIs are not free. A lot of APIs ask you a monthly subscription, or they say, okay, we are going to be free for the first 50 data set that you get from us. After that, you have to pay. The Google API that I was mentioning, the Maps API, it's free to use, right? But they have tiers. If you are using a lot, they're going to start charging you. And that's, I mean, for Airbnb, they are paying Google to get that information. Why? Because, so what Google does is they say if you are using my API more than 10,000 times a day, right? And how is that possible? Right, I create a super awesome website that I'm using Google API, and somehow I have obtained 20,000 users that are using my website. This means I'm hitting Google's API 20,000 times. So they have, let's suppose they have a tier, they're saying, oh, if as long as you are under 10,000 times you access us, it's fine, you can use it for free. But if you go above that limit, then you have to pay us. This means your website is becoming super popular and we want to take the cut out of it. So you have to pay Google for that, right? But in our course, I hope you guys write a website that has that many users. But projects, I haven't still found that student who has written a website within the course that have to pay for Google. So I think we will be fine with using any of those services that's free. Okay, but not all of them are free, of course. If you look at Rapid API, try to look up some APIs. Some of them say, oh, you have to pay us for even one click. So but you can filter those out over here and find out free API. Let's take like 10-15 minutes, spend some time on this one, see what APIs you can find, and how some of the data that you can get back. There was a API that I opened. It's called a numbers API. So this is a interesting. This is an API. If you pass in a number, it gives you like a month and a day. It gives you some information related to that month and day, like what happened on that particular day. So if I do like a test endpoint, you will see my response. Let me close the response headers. Response body, it's a JSON. It's a looks like an object, and then it's giving you these 5 properties within it. So it's giving you a text which tells what happened on that particular month and day. Let's say the 15th. 13th. What happened on month 6 and day 13? Oh, bad gateway. Let's try again. Oh, there we go. So this is just an example. So this is an API that is present in Rapid API. They host a lot of APIs. Some of them are free, some of them not. Basically, it's a marketplace for APIs. Okay. Let me share you one more link that I have found. This is useful. There's somebody on GitHub actually made a list of all APIs. Any project that I'm doing, I'm kind of look at those APIs. Let me see. Of course, I can find it now. This public APIs. Okay, there you go. Slacked out in class activities. This is somebody created their GitHub repo, and this actually has all public APIs. Okay, so for example, let's see, picture of cats from Toronto. So somebody created an API that gives you cat pictures. I mean, that was waiting to happen, right? So let's see, how do we work this? Interactive API can be found over here. Okay. Get your API key. Okay, so you can use their API. The only thing is they're saying you have to sign. Now, you guys will run into this, and it is totally fine. A lot of times you will see that people ask you to sign up to get an API key. Okay, why it is important? That's how they're tracking how many times you're talking to their API. Right, this API key. Every time you make a request, they ask you that you send your API key with every request. And I'll walk you through and I'll show you some example how do we do that. But this is how they are keeping track how many times you are hitting their API. Right? It's the API key is a unique, and if you sign up, everybody is going to have a different API key. All right. So what happens is when you send a request, for example, you want to get a cat picture, you send your API key with that request. That's how you say, oh, you called us one time. You make another request, two times, three, four, five, and that's how they keep track how many times you are hitting their API. Okay, that's how they see if you are going over your quota or not. But that's what the purpose of that API key is. Okay. I hope most of you guys signed up for the New York Times or the OMDB one because that's what we'll be using in our class. Okay. Let's take 5 more minutes. Take a look at Rapid API and see if you can find an API that works. This one you can test over here. All of them actually require API key, but since we are not writing any code right now, they have a test environment over here. You can test it out, and it actually returns you some data, and that's what we are interested in right now. Okay, you will eventually need an API key when you are calling these APIs from your code. Okay. Oh, these guys are giving an API key, so we can use this in our code. You see this rapid API key? Okay. Get trivia effect. Okay, so they actually have another API which gives you trivia effect. Let's try this. Okay, so you pass in something over here. So if you pass in 42, it should give you something related to, yep, makes more sense. Oh no, that's not what I was expecting. Let's see, 31. The number of days and months in January. Okay. 12. What is the significance of it? Oh, number of reps. Learned something new today. Let's see. Ooh, okay. Approximate number of days it takes Mercury to complete its orbit. Oh, 88 days. 22? Is there something PG or not? 42 was the disappointing one actually. I was expecting a different reference, but it says, I thought it was going to say the answer for the universe or something like that. Yeah. $78. I think these are like valid trivia answers, not from like books or anything. So these are not as funny as I thought. Maybe what's the number? 88. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to. Yeah, it's a. Yeah, that's what I tried. Yeah. Try maybe random fact. Let's try random fact. Okay, I don't even understand this. Sunspots. Let's try something. 16. The minimum age for getting a job. Okay. Alright, did anybody find any other interesting API over here? Chuck Norris. Oh, yeah. How did I forget that one? Yeah. Usually somebody. Oh, there it is. Technologist API. Alright. Let's see. So do I need to pass in anything? That's right. Response, body, and there is. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it gives you technologist jokes. That's a nice API. Which one is it? Um, add this one. So what does this do? Oh, nice. Okay. So somebody actually created a website around it, but behind the scenes, if you guys see, they are actually getting all this information from this API, and you can do the same thing. I think you just have to sign up. Actually, they already have an API key. I'll show you how to use one example, and then you can apply that to any API that has API key. Okay, so somebody build this website around uh, oh, if you hover over it, kind of. Oh, there you go. Let's see, next. Okay. Hmm. All right. Any other interesting one? Oh, there's a Facebook one. Oh, this is a private API. So you can use this to find Facebook profile picture. Okay. This the SMS one. This is also a kind of popular one. This you can send text messages using this API. I've some people have projects around it, and in the previous cohort they have created it using this API. All right, of course, Imager has one. We'll be looking at Giphy API to get the Giphy images. Giphies. Skyscanner has an API. Oh, let's see if PayPal shows up. What Irina was saying. Oh, okay. So there's the API that Irina you were mentioning. PayPal, they have an API. You can authorize order, agreement, capture order. Looks like they have a lot of APIs over here. You said USPS? Okay, there's the USPS one. Get delivery status, proof of delivery, get proof of delivery notifications. Okay, you see USPS also has a API. What else? Any other interesting one that you guys found? Recipe. This is people have created projects around this one as well. What is it? Oh, there's a YouTube to MP3 API. YouTube to MP3. Oh, that's cool. Oh, there it is. Convert any video into MP3 format. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So you just pass in the song name and they will return a MP3 version of that.
So how would you do that?
We'll take a look at how would you. I'm going to show you some basic APIs and then you can go ahead and read the documentation and see how would you do that. But I'll show you the from JavaScript how do we access some of those APIs, how do you get that data. But I'm not going to show you like particular how do you do the MP3 one. I'll show you the basic concepts and then you can go ahead and pick any API that you want and see if it works. Open weather map. That's a pretty heavily used one as well. If you want some weather information to show up on your websites, a lot of people use this. And then you have like nice icons and graphics over here telling you the weather information. You can use this API to get that and then kind of show it on your website. Weather APIs. Food related. eBay also has one API, so that's cool. Amazon product. Amazon has one. I'm pretty sure Walmart also has one. Spotify, there's a Spotify one. You can take a look at it and see what all Spotify is giving you information. There are a few more. Oh, cryptocurrency also has one. That's cool. So all of this APIs, basically they are giving you access to the data that they have. Again, and why would they do it? Of course, they are selling the data to you, right? There are free ones. So when you're looking into API, make sure, unless you want to pay for it, try to find a free one. Uh, but there are some that cost, of course, because they are selling you the information that they have, right? Some of them have tier versions. For so many data points, it's free, and then they're going to start charging you after a certain point. Okay. All right. Any questions on the concept or anything before we start coding this and see how this works? Good. Okay. So again, remember until project 1, we are going to be using web APIs that somebody has created. Okay. After when we get into Node.js, we'll be creating those APIs. Okay. So if you think accessing those APIs is difficult, it's 3 times more difficult to actually create an API. We'll take a look at it. And in my day job, that's what I do. I actually create APIs. Day in, day out, I'm creating APIs. That's the back end part of it. Okay, because there's a if you kind of take a look at it and understand that this is exposing it to people you are contacting this and you get the data back. So there's a whole logic going on over here. How do I access this information? How do I secure it? How do I make it in a nice format that the client can understand and all that stuff? Okay, that's the creation part. And we'll take a look at it when we get into Node.js. But for now, we are just accessing an API that somebody has already created for us. Okay? All right. So before we jump into the code, I'm going to share the OMDB API, and this is what we'll be working on today. Okay, so I want you guys to spend just like 5 minutes, take a look at it. And this is basically the documentation that is telling us how do you use this API and what does it do. So I want you guys to take a few minutes and try to see if you can understand what are they saying, how do you use this API. If you signed up for this one, you will have a key. Try to see if you can kind of make it work. If you didn't sign up, for now, preferably I would ask everybody to get their own API keys because these are unique ones that everybody has. But for now, for this website, if you didn't sign up, you can use the key trilogy. Okay. But eventually, if you are using this in your project or something or your homework, I don't know if you have any homework, try to make sure that you sign up and you get your own personal key and not keep using this one. Okay. Again, the reason is that if everybody, and this is API key for not just University of Arizona, I'm pretty sure around US other programs are using the same API key. So there is a possibility you reach the quota and they're going to start blocking it. Oh, you have already reached the maximum number of users or something. I think it's pretty okay for now. So if you didn't sign up, use the key trilogy. If you did, then use your key. Try to figure out from the documentation how can you access JSON. Okay, so you should be able to copy this link, put it in your browser, and you should see JSON data coming to you. Just as I showed you with the New York Times, you should be able to see the data in your browser in a new window. If you get the right URL, you should be able to see some data coming back. Okay, spend a few minutes and see how they are saying you need to talk to their API. They have a nice UI for examples also. You can actually generate, if you use this example, you can generate the URL, put it in the new window or a tab, and you should be able to see JSON data. Again, the goal is that this is going to give you a URL, okay, which you put it in your browser, it should show you a JSON data. And the URL is important because we are going to use the same URL from our JavaScript code and get that JSON, that object, and we are going to parse it. Okay. So look at the website and see how you can obtain that data back. What is it? Well, it depends what you search for. What did you? Okay. Maybe you search for just one movie. So again, what's the purpose of this? This is giving you access to search movies. If you search for one movie, it's going to give you one movie back.
It was just the link like I got an email after
Oh, okay.
Like an example of one movie or something?
Yeah, I mean, look at the documentation on the examples and see what's going on. What was that? Oh, so we already reached the limit. Are you using the trilogy one? The key? So you need to pass in a key. It's not going to work if you're not passing in an API. Either it could be the one that your personal key or use a trilogy. I hope we haven't reached the limit because that's the only key I have. Okay, so let's see what I'm. So this is the documentation, and what are they saying? They are saying this is the URL for if you want to access their APIs. So you need to pass in a key. Okay, so my key, I'm going to use trilogy and pray that it works. If you have your key, you're going to pass that key over here. Okay, now let's see what are they saying. So these are called parameters. You see I, T, right? They are saying I stand for an ID. So we don't know an ID, so I'm going to skip that. T indicates it's a title of the movie. Okay. Let's go and look at the examples. So they're saying if you want to search by title, give a movie name. So let's say spelling this wrong. Okay. Okay. So if I search, this is what comes back. Okay. So you see there's a request. This is the URL that is generated that we are going to be using. So let's go ahead and copy this URL and paste it in the browser. I should see something. but I don't see it. It gives me error saying no API key provided. Remember, they were saying that I need to pass in an API key, and I did not do that. So let's go back and look at the form. They're saying it should be API key is equal to your key. So I'm going to go back here, add that information. API key is equal to this. Was it 1 ampersand or 2 ampersand? This one. Okay. And then let me put my key G. Okay. Let's see if this works. And there it is. Okay. So please understand this URL is the language that we can talk to API to this web API, the OMDB API. Okay. And how do you, what is this URL? How do you construct it? This is where the documentation comes in. So you see what is the, let's break down this URL quickly. Oops. Okay, I can zoom in the URL. So the URL is omdbapi.com/. Okay, this is the main URL. This question mark is important. This stands for query parameters. Okay, this is the indication that tells the API that after that I'm passing in some information that is relevant, and I'm going to use this information and give what is being asked. Okay, everything is after the question mark. Okay, so what are my parameters? API key is one parameter. These parameters are separated by ampersand. Okay, so the first parameter is API key and then the value of that parameter. The second parameter is T. And what is T? If you go to the documentation, they're saying T to them means the title of the movie. Okay, so that's why I have a T is equal to and the movie name. Okay, so if I change the title to something else, let's say it should go back and search something related to this. Okay, again, how did I come to this? They have these examples. So let's say if I have a space in the movie, the space matrix. Oops. So what happened over here? Same thing. This is a main URL. Question mark indicates that everything after that is going to be parameters. These are called query parameters. The space is replaced by a plus sign. This is important. Okay. So OMDB API, the way you are talking to them is that they are going to replace, they are expecting if there's a space, instead of space, put a plus over there. That's what they're saying. It's because your URL and your browser does not recognize a space. Okay. So I want to search for the matrix. I need to change my title over here and say the plus matrix, and then it gives me this JSON object. Okay. Now you see this is a JSON, which is basically an object. If I want to access the title property, I'm going to say this object dot title, and it will give me this. This dot year is going to give me this, and we'll see how do we do that in JavaScript in a minute. Okay, this is just one option. They have a lot more. You can search by year. You can, what else do they have? A type, you can search by a type. Not required, but you can search by a type, they are saying. So you will use the query parameter called type. You can search by year, so you will use Y. Plot, R, they have like different parameters. But the first two are more important, or the second one, the T, is more easy to use. So we'll start with just using the T, but you can add more parameters over here. Okay, all right, questions. Do you understand how to use the OMDB API or not? Yes, Andy. Sorry, Tyler. Right, so look at the documentation. What are they saying? you put it after a query parameter. You use API key is equal to, and then you put your API key. Okay, so in my URL, this is what I did. I said question mark API key, and then I put in my API key, which is Trilogy. Put in your API key, and then everything else is after that. So the first parameter is going to be your API key. Okay, that's how you put it. What is it? What is it saying? False error. So do you have the URL correct? You have this question mark API key is equal to your API key ampersand and then the title. Okay, if you're getting an error, then this means there's something wrong with the URL. Make sure your URLs are good. Christina, did that work? No? What's the error? Yeah, so are you putting in the right API key? Okay. So just make sure copy paste exactly. So there's an error in your API key. That's what it is. Once you put in the correct one, it should give you some data back.
So you always enter the and after the API key?
Yes.
And then the type of
Right. This is the ampersand is the separation of parameters. Okay, so there are two parameters over here. One is called API key and one is called T, and you can put even more than these parameters. You see this parameter set? You can put an I, T, you can put a type, you can use Y, and all of them you're going to use separate them out by ampersand. So I'm going if I want to use Y, so I'm going to say ampersand Y is equal to 1999. Okay, this was the time when the movie was released, and it brings you back this information. Okay. Yes, that is unique to OMDB. That's how they have. What is not unique is ampersand and question mark. Question mark is always signifies everything after that is query parameters. So this is where you begin query parameters. Okay. Ampersand separates these parameters. This is fixed. What is not fixed is these names over API key. This is unique to OMDB. Okay. Question mark and ampersand are part of the URL building. Okay. Again, the unique part is API key. You will find different websites using different parameters. They might say this key. Most of them call it API key, but could be different. Okay. And how do you find this? Again, read the documentation, and this is the language we need to talk to OMDB API. Different ones have different syntax. All right, is everyone able to use their API keys or the Trilogy one and show up the JSON? Anybody not able to do that? Because if this doesn't work, in your code you're not going to get this information, and that's what we need to do.
you want the major thing in particular or just
No, any movie. It's not any movie that you like. You can put it over here and get that info. I just want to make sure that you are getting the information back in JSON. Okay, because we are going to use the exact URL in our code now, right? Because this right now doesn't help. We can visualize it, but let's suppose I want to create a website with the movie information, and I think I can do a better job than what OMDB is doing. Let's suppose so I want, but I don't have the data, right? I don't own this data, so that's why I'm using OMDB to get that information and then make my own website. Good. All right. All right, so now we are going to be coding for the rest of the time today, and that's where just make sure you understand some of these coding things. Okay. All right, before I show you the code, we are going to I need to. Okay. All right, everybody ready? Ethan, are we good? Good. Okay. All right. So before we look at the coding, and this is what is the confusing part when we come to the coding part, the two concepts: synchronous versus asynchronous. Okay. Now, what does synchronous versus asynchronous mean when we come to JavaScript? Okay. Um, to give you some information, JavaScript is asynchronous programming. Asynchronous. Okay. But what is the difference? Okay. So let's suppose let's take an example that I am as an instructor. I'm answering your questions. Okay. So I'm going one by one. Let's go. Let's say I go to Jeremy first. He asked me a question. Okay, and then I'm going to stop over here. I'm going to think about that question. I'm going to come up with a solution. I'm going to answer. Okay? And then I'm going to move to John. Then he's going to ask me a question. And then I'm going to stop over here. I'm going to dedicate my time. I'm going to come up with a solution and answer him. Then I go to Nicole. Same thing. Stop here. Michael. Okay? Chris. And then I keep going. Right? Now, in a different scenario, Jeremy asked me a question, and I absorb the question, and then I once move to John. Then he asks me the question, and then I move on to Nicole. And then when Nicole asks me the question, let's suppose at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, and I get the answer that Jeremy was asking. And then you take the question, I'm going to go back to Jeremy and answer his question. Okay? Then I'm going to move on to Michael. And at that instant, let's suppose Nicole asked me an easy question and I got an answer. I'm going to come back to Nicole, answer a question, and then move on. Okay? At this instant, I get answer for John. I come back to John and answer the question. Okay? So you see, what's the difference between the two? The first one, I was blocked at one person, and I cannot move to the next person until I answer that question. In the second scenario, I'm taking questions and moving on. Okay, I'm dividing my time. As soon as I get the solution for that particular question, I go back, answer, and then move on. Okay, so the second one is more efficient, right? Efficient use of my time. Because Nicole asked me an easy question and I did not have to think too much, so I was able to answer her question. Versus in the previous scenario, I was blocked, and until I get to her position, I was not able to answer a question. Okay, now, does everybody understand the example and see the advantage? Okay?
It doesn't go in order?
It does not go in order. There's no order. In the second scenario, there is no order. It's just whenever I come back with an answer. There's no order. Okay? The first one has an order. The second one does not. And it gives that freedom, and that's why it's good, because I'm not wasting anybody else's time, and my time also is being used efficiently. That's the advantage of the second approach. Of course, the second approach is difficult to understand versus the first one, right? It's human nature. It's easy. Oh, I'm going to do this and then move on, then move on. The second approach is kind of out of order, and as humans, we don't like that out of order thing. So that's the confusing part. Okay. Now, JavaScript follows the same thing. This concept. JavaScript is asynchronous. What this means? That we are going to be making API calls, okay? And JavaScript is going to absorb your call and then move on to the next one. It's not going to block over there. Remember the set timeout and interval? Exactly the same thing. When we make an API call from JavaScript, it is going to skip to the next part, and when you get this data back, then it's going to come back to the same code, and then we say, oh, here's the data now. It's not going to wait on it. Remember that. Just like set timeout and set interval. Okay? So that's what's called asynchronous programming. Okay? So remember that JavaScript follows asynchronous programming when you're calling, when you're using web APIs. All right? So if you have any code, just like set timeout, that is dependent on that data, you cannot put that in the next line. We'll see how to do it. But remember, JavaScript follows asynchronous programming. Okay? It will return your calls out of order. There is no order. Okay? Some of the calls might come faster. I mean, right now we have a fast internet, so usually you will see them coming in order. But there is no guarantee that these calls are going to come in order. So never ever write a code that depends in order. Okay? Because you cannot predict what order these calls are going to come in. Everybody clear on that? Okay, that's the essence of asynchronous programming. Okay, and that's probably the most confusing part because we are at this point we haven't done any asynchronous programming, so it's kind of difficult for us to understand how this is working. All right, so let's see how do we do this in JavaScript. All right, we are going to use OMDB and get this information in our code now. All right, so over here, I already have a template. I have my HTML file. I'm using jQuery to solve this first example. Okay, HTML, simple JavaScript, jQuery function. I want to make sure that this is ready before I move on. All right, so and the reason I'm using jQuery is you can do the exact same thing in JavaScript. All right, everybody understands that, right? But jQuery makes it a lot easier to make these calls. And if anybody is interested, I'll show you how to do that in JavaScript also. It's a little bit complicated, okay? But jQuery is easier to understand, and right now we are focused on that. We want to make sure that we understand how to do it. All right, so that's why we are using jQuery. But please remember, you can do the exact same thing in JavaScript also. All right, where's my... All right, so let's see. Okay. This is just I'm giving an example. Okay. Don't worry about the activity. Let's look at the example, and then you guys will do the same thing. Okay. So in jQuery, there is a function available conveniently called Ajax. Okay. The purpose of this function is to do the same thing. This function goes out to the web API and gets the information back. All right. Remember the concept is called Ajax, so they have named their function as Ajax. Okay. Now, what does this function consist of? You have to pass in an object. Okay. So this is the function $.ajax, and it takes an argument which is an object. Now this object has some predefined properties. Okay, and that's where you need to tell what you're trying to do. Okay, so let's see. So the first property is URL. Okay, so you need to tell jQuery, you need to tell JavaScript, this Ajax function, what is the URL of the web API that you're trying to get information from. Okay, that's all. So I'm trying to get information, this thing. So this is my URL. So I'm going to just simply copy and then paste it over here. Okay, any questions so far? Good, pretty straightforward. Ajax function takes in an object. The first property is URL, and this is what you define the URL that you're trying to get all the data from. Okay, you need to tell that. The second property is called method. Okay, there are predefined HTTP methods. Okay, these have been defined as standard. What they mean is, what are you trying to do with this request? Get means that I am trying to get some data from this URL. Okay, now this is only one HTTP method. It doesn't matter, you can put lowercase or uppercase, but it has to be spelled exactly like GET. Okay, now there are other methods. I'm going to just mention it, don't worry about it right now. We're not going to use any of those right now. Eventually we will take a look at it. Post, put, delete. You might see it in some examples, but don't worry about it. The get method signifies that from this URL, I'm getting some information. I'm going to get a JSON back. That's what it does. So you need to tell what you're trying to do. Why? There are other possibilities that you see on the board: post, put, and delete. Those are different methods, and you tell what you're trying to do. Okay? We'll go through them in detail after the project, because those are more required when you're trying to create an APIs. Right now, we are just getting the information. We are using somebody else's API and getting the information. So for now, this is good. Get, the method is going to be get. Okay, so remember two here. There are other properties, but they're optional. We don't have to worry about it right now. If I want to make a successful call, I need to pass in a URL and the method. Okay, yes. No, that's what I'm saying. The case doesn't matter, but it has to be spelled exactly like the GET. Lowercase, uppercase is fine.
But it does have to be a string.
It has to be a string, yes. By standard, we put in uppercase because that's how, if you look at the documentation, this is how methods, HTTP methods are defined. So it is good to follow the same standard. Okay, but casing does not matter. Okay? All right. This is the confusing part now. All right. So line number 8. This is the stepped out part. This is eventually, this is how your method is going to look like. Okay. So this is called chaining the methods. All right. It's fine if you don't get it. It's fine. Eventually you will understand what's going on. But that it has a name, so I'm going to mention it. It's called chaining the methods. But this is the exact syntax that we are trying to achieve. And then you will see there's a function called then. Okay, so I'm going to add a function at the end, dot then. Let me put this in new line so that kind of look nicer a little bit. Does it? Okay. Okay, so basically start with this syntax, and then we are going to fill these parameters. Now what is this then function? Okay, so there's a concept in JavaScript, and this is because JavaScript is asynchronous. It's called promise. When you make this AJAX call, just this, you will not get the response instantaneously. Okay, this is asynchronous programming. All right, your call is not blocked over there. You're going to make this call, and then JavaScript is going to move on to the next piece of code. Okay, this then function is going to give you a promise. Literally, whatever promise means, that's what it means over here. This is saying that, all right, JavaScript, you are making a web API call, right? And this is async, okay? But I promise you that when the data comes back, I'm going to execute the function that you mentioned over here, okay? All right, again, you're going to set up, make a call. This is an async call. Your code is not going to wait. JavaScript is going to fire this call and move on to the next part, all right? But this function over here is saying that, I'm keeping track of it, all right? When the data comes back, whatever function, whatever you pass in over here, I'm going to call those functions, okay? Now, your then requires 2 parameters, and both are callback functions, okay? I hope everybody went back and looked it up and remember what callback functions are. Your then function requires 2 callback functions. So let's call the first one, let's define those 2 functions. So I'm going to call them function callback success. Okay, that's my first function, and I'm going to define another function called function callback error. I haven't filled out any information over here. We'll complete it. Okay, so your then function requires two things. All right, it actually requires only one callback function. The second wasn't optional, but it is good practice to put these two functions. Okay, so your callback requires two callback functions. So I'm going to pass in the first one is success. The second one is error. Come on. Oh, am I in the? What am I doing? Okay, that's better. Okay. Now, what does this mean when we talk about callback functions? Okay, when the promise is returned, when the request that you made is successful, it is going to call this first function. If there was any error in making this request, it's going to call this function. Okay? All right? Remember, ajax.then, this is the syntax. Your then function is going to take two callbacks. Okay? Callback function, what are callback functions? They're just another functions. Okay? So I created two functions on the top, and then I put those, I'm calling them over here.
But you haven't defined them.
Yes, I defined them over here on the top. Right? This is the definition. I haven't put anything, but I'm going to complete those in a minute. Basically, this is the syntax. Okay? Now, if your call is successful, it is going to call this function. If it is failed or if there's any error, it's going to call this function. That's the purpose of these two functions. The order matters. The first one is always going to be called if it is successful. Now, this callback function is going to have a parameter. Okay, it's called, you can call this response, you can call this data, you can call this D, you can call this R, it does not matter. But this is the variable that's going to have your JSON, your JavaScript object. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a console log so that we can see what's in it. Usually I like to call it error, you can call it ERR, it doesn't matter. This will have, if there is any error, is going to put that error string, error information in this variable. Okay, so I'm going to console log. You can do a console log, it doesn't matter, it's kind of similar. This thing is, it's going to give you like a nice red error, kind of shows you, stands out. So that's why I'm using console error. It's kind of same as console log, it doesn't matter. Okay, so one more time. So this is the syntax that I want to do. It's going to be $.ajax.then. Okay, and then within that ajax, I am going to pass in an object. The object has two properties, URL and method. Right, this is the URL, I'm trying to get the JSON back, and this is the method. Then function takes in two callback functions. If your request is successful, it's going to call this function, and it's going to pass that JSON object over here. If it fails, it's going to call this function. Okay? Now, so let's go ahead and run this and see if this works. So if I do this thing, shows up, inspect, console, and there is my data. Okay, and where is this console log coming from? It's coming from this success message. Now, let's suppose if I want to access actors property, right? How do I do it? Response dot actors, and shows me actor information. Okay, if I want to access the title, where's the title? It's called title uppercase. The first parameter is, I'm going to say console log response dot title, and there's the title. Again, this is an object that we already know how to parse. What you do is generally we output everything and then we find out what we are trying to access. Okay? All right, questions? Let me see. So what I was saying is it is a asynchronous. So anything that you put after this is going to be rendered first. All right. There is probably I don't want to say 0% chance, but there I highly doubt that this line will ever be executed after this thing. Okay, that's how this is the rendering of JavaScript is so fast that this console log will almost always happen before this call completes. Okay, that's why you see this showing up over here. Let's suppose even if you are adding something, let's say you have let x is equal to 4, let y is equal to 5, console log x plus 4, x plus y. Okay, somebody you have some random calculation, right? Again, this will almost always happen first before this call completes. You will never see this call being completed before. Okay, so if I have any code that is dependent on this data over here, okay, if you put it right after this, it's never going to work. Never. All right, that's the confusion that people run into because JavaScript is async. It's always almost going to execute. It's going to make this Ajax call and then disappear. All right, the same thing asynchronous. It's going to remember it and then move on to the next one. So it's going to execute everything that is after. Once this is complete or whenever the call comes back, then it's going to come back to this then function. Okay. Now, the thing is almost always anything that you have after is going to complete first before it comes back. Theoretically, it is waiting as soon as this comes back, it's going to render it, but your memory is more efficient, your laptop is super fast, the CPU is fast, that it's almost always going to execute everything after, then it's going to come back to it. Okay, but in theory, it is taking a note, it's making this call. Why? Because the network calls are always going to be slower than your computer, right? I'm making a network call over here, right? I'm going into the internet with this call, right? I'm going to this URL and getting the data back. That's always going to be slower than your computer, what they are trying to write. Okay, that's the reason. Okay, so let's suppose you are waiting, you are saying, oh, this is going to give me some movie information. Can I log this after this? It's always going to give you undefined or something. It's not even if you declare this response object on the top, okay, somewhere as a global variable, you will still be not able to access this data. The only way to access this data is in the callback function. Okay, callback success. Now you have access to any data. So if you have any code, you have any website rendering that you need to do, you have a jQuery page that kind of shows you the title, all that code has to be inside the first callback function. All right, questions? A boolean to load. Load what?
If the Ajax has called back, and then
Right, you don't have to.
If that's true.
So are you asking
Basically,
jQuery doing or do I have to do it?
No, you do it.
No, you don't have to. The reason is this callback is only going to get fired when you get the data back. There is no other way this code is going to get executed. So you don't have to even check it. JavaScript is checking.
Function outside of that function.
Oh, that boolean is not going to help you. Why? Because if you put a boolean here, that boolean is always going to get executed first before this comes back. Because this is not synchronous code. Over here, if you say, oh, if what Chris is saying, that yeah, if I put a global variable here is true, right, and then set my flag over here is true is equal to true, I got my data back. But the problem over here is outside this function is this statement is always going to be executed first. So you will never get this working. Okay, so if you are looking for any data that is dependent, you have to put that code over here. There is no other way or place you can do it. This is the only way to do it. Okay, good question. Any other questions? Okay, so I can make multiple AJAX calls. Let's suppose I'm looking for a different movie. Okay, I can totally make more than one AJAX calls, but that has to be after this. So same thing. Okay, this time the only difference is I'm going to replace the URL with a different movie. Hold on, and then it gives you two different ones. What was that? No, it only takes one URL. You cannot put multiple. Yeah, if you put this is the only valid URL. If it does not match this, your OMDB API is going to fail. It doesn't know anything, so you cannot put multiple unless they have. If you look at the documentation, if there's a possibility to put multiple movies, then yes, you can do it. If the documentation says no, then you cannot do it. Okay, what I'm trying to show is you can make multiple AJAX calls, okay, in the same code. The thing is, again, these calls are independent, and you cannot say that one is going to come back before the first one. Let's see if it happens. Oh yeah, you see, so my first call is for the matrix and my second call is for interstellar. Okay, since these are async calls, the order does not matter. They can come back at any time. Right now the matrix is coming first and interstellar is coming first. Let's go ahead and refresh. Still. You see, now interstellar came first. The order do not depend on the order of the call. It's not going to be perfect every time. Okay, you see I made the interstellar call second, but it came back, it returned first. So the order, you cannot depend on async order also. Okay, any other question? Yes, what is it? This one, you can put different function, it doesn't matter. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you can use that. Yeah, but then you are using the same code. Yes, just make sure if both of requests are kind of following the same, then you use the same. Otherwise, you use different functions. Yes, sir.
So the syntax can potentially change depending on the API, right?
Which syntax? Only the URL is going to change, nothing else.
Okay, so depending on if they have, well, if they have like the option there to call multiple objects, depending on the API itself.
Okay, so different APIs are going to have different URL. That's the only code change. And then your response is going to vary based on what you're getting back. So this response object, this thing, this information is going to change. So let's suppose you are using weather API, right? And their URL is www.weather.api slash city name is equal to Phoenix. Okay. So and then they're going to, all you're going to do is just change this URL to whatever they are saying. And you change this URL parameter. That's it. Everything else remains the same. And then this changes, of course. Why? Because they might not, weather API is not going to have actors or titles, so it's going to change it, right?
Parameter input.
Yes, that's URL method to callback function. This is going to remain the same. The URL changes. Okay? Yes, Mike.
So every time you press refresh, that update counter or
Uh-huh. Oh, yes, yes. Every time I refresh, it's a new call. They are looking at my API key and they are saying, oh, I hit this API second time, third time, fourth time. Yes. Okay. So if you share this, if I deploy this URL to a public like a GitHub pages and I share it with you, every time you open my website, that's another click that goes to this API. Okay. Take note of that. This is free one, but in project I've seen people, they are upcoming for demo. Of course, you are testing it, right? But they have already reached their limit, and they're like, "Oh my god, I reached my limit." So the demo shows false. You cannot access any more data. So just be careful when you are um, using some API that has a threshold. Try to make sure you don't go over the threshold, especially before your demo day, right? All right, one more thing, and then we'll do an exercise after lunch. Remember this syntax, I'm using a callback function. Okay. Now this is the same as putting this anonymous functions over here. And generally you will see this syntax more. So you will see a function, same thing. The first one is going to be a success. So you will see a response. And then you're going to put the same code here, response. This is my first function. Okay, the second function is the error one, so you will see another anonymous function, this time with an error parameter, and you're going to console log that error. Let's use the console.error, and I'm going to put the error back here. Okay, same thing as this one. The only thing is I'm using anonymous functions over here. The more you practice and kind of come to this conclusion, the better, because over the samples, examples, you will see this syntax a lot. A lot of people are kind of used to this, okay? But it's the same thing as doing this thing. Callback function, I defined it on the top, same parameters. This syntax is using anonymous function. The first function will be called when it is successful. The second function will be called if there's any error. Okay, now if I want to parse anything, I'm going to say console log response dot add course, and it will show me the same thing. Okay. Any questions? You guys really get it, or yes? Yes.
Okay, this is for
One API.
one request. If I do multiple requests, is there a possibility that it updates my group dynamically instead of making particularly like another part? I want two movies.
Yes.
So
You have to make three different.
whatever each part, there is no possibility to know how many points I did the other call and so.
Yes, and that's not the limitation on the code or anything. The problem is OMDB is letting you only search one movie. Okay, so you can only pass in one movie, and they'll give you information, right? If you find a way, look at the document. There might be. I don't think there is, and this is restricted by OMDB. It's not our fault. They are not letting you search multiple movies. Maybe look at this S parameter, but again, that's more on how the APIs is defined. Okay, it's not on your side. You can make multiple calls. I made multiple calls. I made one for Interstellar, then I made for this, two different calls, right? But they are both independent. Now, we can look at the documentation. Is there a possibility that you can separate by comma and say Interstellar? Okay. It's not, then there's no possibility. Yes. This is again. This we need to learn. We need to say speak the same language of the API. If the API does not allow this, it's not good. It's not in our hands. Maybe you can find some API that does that. It might not be this. Yes. Exactly like this. Yes. So your card code is going to go inside over here. Why? Because your card is looking for these things. They are never going to be present if you put it outside this function. Never. There's no way. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, yes, yes. We'll take a look at some of them, but yes, they can be because you are rendering your jQuery API for them. Yes. Okay. Let's take lunch break. We'll start at 12:55. Okay, we'll do this exercise. You guys are going to do the same exercise. We'll see. Make sure we understand that.
Yeah.
55, 12. Oh, I was supposed to say 12:50. Never mind. I just went over 5 minutes. Never mind. That's okay. That's okay.